Hi Robyn, lovely to see you today in Johannesburg, and I'm here in sunny Brighton. Welcome to the Listen.Better vlog for May 2021. So you are the founder and CEO of the 3Cs. Tell me all about it, and why did you start the business in such a challenging time?
Thanks, Annabel. Nice to see you today. Well, the 3Cs is a brand new business, as you just mentioned. I started it because I've had 32 years of experience building up the largest public relations network across Africa. I've learned many years in 32 years as an entrepreneur for 25 years or 23 years, and then as the executive working at BCW Africa, so heading up part of a global organization. I think I've learned many lessons over 32 years, and it's time for me to share some of what I've learned. So the 3Cs are coaching, culture, and collaboration. And those three things are the platforms that will provide me an opportunity to do what I'm passionate about and to give back, I really believe. So you asked about why I started a business at such a difficult time. And, I think that there's no right time or wrong time to start a business. And I think for me, the time was just right now. So the conversation with BCW Africa and with BCW Global started in 2019 when the business turned 30. And I kind of had a feeling that 30 years was a long time and that it was time for me to do something else. Then COVID came. And so we didn't do what we had planned to do in 2020. But we all agreed that the time was right now for me to have this opportunity. There's a reason for the 3Cs, as I said, the things that I've learned over 30 years. But also in 2017, I decided that it was time for me to go back and study further. And so I studied qualifications that fit into all three of my Cs. So the first one is coaching. I went back to university in the United Kingdom, actually. I went to Ashridge Business School, and I did a master's in executive coaching in 2017, 2018, and got the final certification in 2019. My interest in executive coaching isn't a new thing. It's come from the fact that I've run the BCW Africa Training Academy for 30 years. And over the years, we have done training of our own people, but also our partners across the continent, and many clients, staff have benefited from our training, which does include some leadership development and therefore some coaching. And over many years of doing it, I got more and more interested in the high level executive coaching. And so that was something that I wanted to do to realize a dream of mine. I'm going back to university and doing that. The second C is for culture. And I think that my interest in culture comes from the fact that I live in South Africa, which is a multicultural, but I also have worked for 30 years across the continent of Africa. And I have done business with clients from all different cultures and built partnerships with people from all different cultures without having had any formal training in what learning about cultures is about. So it was trial and error and picking up as I went along. But in later years, I started to read about and become more interested in the fact that we are different. And I'm talking human culture now, as opposed to organizational culture. So each one of us, Annabel, you and me, we would be different in the way in which we do things because we come from different cultural backgrounds. And I became interested in a specific body of research, which I've gone and studied. And that led me to doing the work around culture. Collaboration is my third C. So if I was a lawyer, I would be saying mediation, but I'm not a lawyer. And I've always wondered why lawyers get to do the job of mediation in legal disputes, because lawyers are taught to win, not to reach a collaborative outcome. And mediation is actually about reaching an outcome that's going to be okay for both parties. So for me, it should be collaboration, not mediation. And it's also something that I've been back and studied, because I believe that in the world today and in businesses, in all different organizations, there are more and more times when there are conflicts arising. And I believe that you can collaborate your way to a proper outcome of a conflict rather than, defaulting to the legal route or having a big fight.
Gosh, you've got a fantastic wealth of experience there, and clearly you've really thought through against each of the C's and then supplemented your training over the last few years. So very well thought out strategy. So with that background, what's an ideal client going to be for the 3Cs?
So from a cultural point of view, an ideal client would be a client that works in a multicultural environment. So it might be that you have multicultural people in your own team, or it might be that you work with companies, you work with other companies where the cultures are, where the people are from diverse cultures. And an ideal client would be a client where building successful teams, building diversity into the organization is incredibly important. Over the last years in South Africa specifically, but all over the world, there's been an enormous focus on diversity and inclusion. And I think that many companies have got diversity right because it's relatively easy to do, because diversity is a quantitative measure. It's a statistic, really. And if you walked into my office at BCW in South Africa, for example, you would be able to look around at the diverse cultures and say, oh, they've done well on diversity. But the question is, how well have we done on inclusivity? And the two things are different. Inclusivity is behavioral, so it's a qualitative measure. And I think it's a pity that the two things have been put together and they've almost become one term in organizations, because actually they're very different things. And my work on building cultural competence and making people more aware of cultural similarities and differences is focused very much on the inclusion side of things, which I think is increasingly important in every organization today. So that would be my ideal client from a cultural point of view. And in coaching, any client would be a great client from a coaching perspective. I think that having been a leader at the top of an organization myself for a very long time, it's often a very lonely place to be. The senior people are not in a position to interface with people all over the organization just as natural human beings because of the roles that they fill. And so I think executive coaching is an incredibly valuable thing to offer any executive in an organization. And my belief is that last year with COVID, and quite understandably, all big organizations all over the world cut costs wherever they could, because none of us knew what the outcome of COVID would be. And one of the costs that I think organizations cut is the cost related to the way in which they support their people. So whether it was training, executive coaching, any of the things that organizations do to provide a supportive environment, really in most instances got cut last year. As I said, for good reason. I think we all did it. But now COVID is going to go on for longer than we thought it was going to. And actually, the world has changed. And I think that the time to support executives is even more now than it has ever been before. And that's where executive coaching really comes in.
Excellent. So what will good look like when you've worked with a client for 6 months? You mentioned diversity being a stats and data. So inclusivity, measuring culture and the impact of coaching. How will you define whether you've done a good job with 3Cs and your clients?
So you'll see it in people behavior. And I really believe that people behavior is what makes an organization be successful. At the end of the day, you can say all sorts of things about what kind of a culture, organizational culture you're going to create. But if people don't feel included and don't feel comfortable in the culture that you create, then you don't get the result that you need from your people all working in the same direction. In coaching, in an executive coaching job, you always will identify coaching objectives or coaching goals with the coachee at the beginning of the exercise. So whether it's a 6-month program or a 12-month program, you'd be able to see progress in specific objectives along the way. And so that's one that's relatively clear in terms of, has this been successful or not? For me, what makes me feel successful in executive coaching is if I know that I provided the executive with a safe space and a good sounding board. And if I know that I didn't intervene in the process, that for me is a successful executive coaching exercise, because the coaching is not about my outcome, it's about the coachee's outcome. And one of the very important things as an executive coach is that you're not there to tell the person what to do. You're really there to help the person, to ask the right questions, to listen intently, and to help them to work out the solutions to the things that they're facing themselves by providing them with holding up the mirror when it's necessary, and providing them with a safe space in which they can explore and work the things out for themselves. So if I have a feeling that I didn't become part of the conversation, then I know I'm doing a good job as an executive coach and there'll be a successful outcome. On the cultural side, what you would see is an organization where when they say retention of staff across diverse cultures, it actually is that. There is retention of staff. Because when people don't feel included, they're much more likely to see to get another job offer and just do what looks like jumping ship. And we would naturally reframe from our own perspectives, our own cultural perspectives, and say that person doesn't stay around. This one's a rolling stone. That one's not loyal. But if you could just put yourself into the other person's shoes by being culturally aware, you might actually realize that what you feel is a very comfortable place where you feel at home is not necessarily comfortable to another person. And so for me, staff retention would be something that would be a sign of success on building cultural competence, as would giving people opportunities to, to soar to greater heights in an organization, and really giving them the opportunities. So when you promote somebody who is different culturally, for example, into your exco for the first time, do you really open the door and let that person in? Or do you give them the job, but not actually open the door? As an exco, if you've all worked together for a number of years, you wouldn't even realize how you actually do things. You would only realize how you do things if somebody else couldn't fit in, and you're not going to be aware of that if you don't develop cultural competence and cultural know-how, really.
I love the phrase holding up a mirror in relation to the coaching. I think that's really interesting. And from an anthropological point of view, that was my degree, the idea of really understanding it from another's perspectives really resonates with me. So yeah, thank you.
And I didn't actually say anything about the collaboration, but for me, the collaboration is something where there's a difficult situation that's arisen in any organization. It could be within one small team, it could be across an organization. To me, collaboration means you start off from a point of difference and you end up in a point of similarity. And it's not necessarily that everybody came to one point, but it's that you got to a point where you could agree to disagree, but you do it in a way that's not harmful to anybody who's involved.
That sounds very powerful and something much needed in many organisations. You've clearly been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt with over 30 years working with a very large organisation. What keeps you awake now? What are the challenges you feel and how do you cope with those?
So, if I think back to when I started what's now BCW Africa 32 years ago, I started the business on my own with my first baby being 4 months old. So if I think back about that now, I think, goodness, who does that? And then people say to me now, Robyn, who starts a new business? In the midst of COVID, who gives up a good career and starts a new business? And then I have the same feeling that I had then, and that is a feeling of fear, because every now and then I wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I'm reminded of what Sheryl Sandberg wrote in her book, Lean In, which I thought was a very powerful read. And she asked a question. She said that along the way, somebody asked her the question, but Sheryl, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And it's a question that I often ask myself. So if I get that feeling inside of, oh my goodness, what have I done? I force myself to be mindful of it and to breathe deeply. And then I say to myself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And I can always work out what the answer is if I can just put the fear behind me. So I think that is probably the biggest thing, is that I have moments when I think I feel absolutely terrified now, just like I did when at that stage long ago. And I didn't have the wisdom of Sheryl Sandberg's, what would I do if I wasn't afraid, when I did it the first time. So now I do, and that will help me to not let fear make me freeze.
I like that. Feel the fear and do it anyway, as they say.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Sheryl Sandberg and her book, Lean In. Any others that inspire you from a leadership point of view? Who motivates you and inspires you?
It's funny, if I think about it, and this sounds terribly negative, but I think if I think about the world's leaders today, I'm not sure that there is one really who inspires me right now. Of course, there have been over time, and I'm a South African, so of course I'm going to say Nelson Mandela inspires me. But he absolutely did inspire me. I met him on a number of occasions for work reasons at BCW. So, I was lucky enough to meet him on a number of occasions. And I absolutely know that his point of departure was always that there is an outcome that's going to be an outcome that's fair to all people. And that, I guess, is where my collaboration thing comes from, is that I do believe that we can work things out to be fair to all parties. So, he would be an inspiration. I have to say, a person who experienced what he experienced and came out with no bitterness and actually no regrets is amazing. And I want to live my life with no regrets as well. It's not an easy thing to do, because of course things happen in your life that you regret, but I want to know that I get to the end of what I'm doing without looking back and saying I didn't try something because I was too scared. Yeah, I'd say Nelson Mandela probably.
How wonderful to have met Nelson Mandela. How did that feel, just to dive onto that.
It was amazing. I met him through work, through on 2 or 3 different occasions, working with corporate clients in South Africa. One of them actually was at a charity event, which was Nelson Mandela's birthday. So, he was always focused on the goodwill of children, on the well-being of children. So we organized a massive birthday party with a whole lot of different corporate clients who were people like Lego and Barbie and all different toy manufacturers, food manufacturers. And so that was the first time I met him, actually. It was the first big birthday party that was organized. So there were children there from all sorts of places of safety and orphanages and things. And each of the suppliers, and I was looking after 2 clients who had children's products, each of the suppliers had set up an area where children could come and play and learn things. And he went from one area to the next, playing with the children and saying hello to all of us who were there as the organizers. So he was amazing. I also worked with him on a big project for the Gates Foundation, which was to do with HIV/AIDS, and that was obviously a privilege to work with him and with Bill and Melinda Gates on that project. So that was amazing as well. And there were a couple of other occasions as well where I had the opportunity to work with him, and on every occasion it was a special occasion because of who he was.
What will you take as one major learning from the last 12 months, Robyn?
So I think I've got 2 things. The one I already mentioned, and that is that I think that all organizations are going to be able to learn from the fact that one of the first things we did was looking at cost cutting, which I absolutely understand, being responsible for P&L myself at BCW Africa. But I think that maybe we cut a cost, which was our staff support cost, too quickly and too easily. I understand the decision, and I did it as well. So I'm not blaming other people. I did it too. But then if I think about it now, the thing that we probably needed to do, and let's hope we learn this if there's another COVID-19 type thing again, the thing that we needed to do more than anything was to support our own people. And I'm not sure that as leaders, we could be proud of ourselves in terms of the way we did that. I think in my experience now, most organizations have seen that and are saying we have to make sure we support our people now in 2021 as we go into, let's say, the next phase of COVID-19. So that I think would be one big learning. And then the other thing, and I learned this from clients of BCW Africa, but also for me personally, is that when something big and unexpected happens, we can all have that, the natural crisis kind of response of, fight, flight, or freeze. And I think that many organizations froze and many people froze last year. And froze could have manifested as we canceled our PR projects, we canceled our advertising campaigns, we decided we'd do nothing because we didn't know what was going to happen next. So we worked very hard as BCW Africa with our clients to make sure that we persuaded them not to cancel things, to rather repurpose and to make sure that they still were out there doing the things they needed to do. And at the same time, for me, it was a time of coming to a realization of the decisions that we had made in 2019 about me changing role were the right decisions. And even though it was more terrifying to do it, it was the right thing for me to do. So I think courage is something that we all have learned about over the last year. And I think going forward, there are going to be many examples where leaders need to be courageous. It's not always an easy thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do.
Yes, all the data and the work we've been doing shows that the mental health impact has been enormous, particularly on the younger staff members in particular who have had to work in challenging circumstances at home, haven't perhaps got the luxury of space and sharing technology and space around the kitchen table. So yeah, I think absolutely resonate with that and support investing in well-being, certainly. So you mentioned you didn't want to have any regrets, echoing Nelson Mandela. What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time and tell your younger self, perhaps your 18, 20-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I think my advice would be courageous. Take the difficult decisions if you have to. Be brave about the things that you do. So I'm not necessarily saying it's be bold, because I don't see myself as a bold person, but I do see myself as somebody who's been brave over the years. And I think if I was giving anybody advice now, I would say, if you have a dream, work out how you can pursue your dream, because you don't want to get to be older and then look back and say, I really wanted to do that, but I didn't ever do it. So, I think be brave, think things through, don't be cavalier, but be brave. If you can find a way to work out to achieve what you want to achieve, then that's the right thing to do. Your decisions will always be, at the end of the day, even if sometimes your decisions look wrong, later in life, you look back and you've learned something from them. So I think that if you think things through, the decisions you make that affect you always end up being the right decisions somehow at the end of the day.
No experience is ever wasted, in other words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robyn, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, and have a very good rest of week, and hope to meet you in person at some point in some future world.
Thank you, Annabel, and likewise, thank you for the opportunity.